A pair of serial killers roamed the Midwest, preying on adults and children alike. Always a step behind, agents had no choice but to follow the trail of bodies. As the crime spree raged out of control, pressure mounted to stop these killers.
They swept through 6 states like a plague, thrill killers acting without rhyme or reason. They targeted adults and young girls, kidnapping, murdering, then moving on to kill again. And in their rampage, they left plenty of clues. But moving targets are the hardest to hit. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The hunt was on for these killers with a knack for eluding authorities. We hoped a nationwide dragnet would bring them to justice.
In Kenosha, Wisconsin, a community close to the Illinois border, single mother Juanita Wheat arrived home with her 9-year-old daughter Vernita and their new friend Robert Knight. It was getting late on the evening of May 29, 1984, when they returned from a day of fun at a local carnival. Robert told Juanita that he had a belated Mother's Day present for her at his place just a few blocks away. He asked if Vernita could help him carry it back. He promised it would only take an hour. Reluctant at first, Juanita gave in to her daughter's excited pleas.
All right. Be goodbye, baby. All right, we'll be right back. Take care, mommy. I will.
As it approached midnight, Robert and Vernita had not yet returned. Juanita was anxious about leaving her apartment to look for her daughter. If Vernita arrived to an empty home, the young girl might panic. But the worry became too great. Juanita decided to go and find her daughter. She went to the address Robert had given her. When she arrived, her panic melted into horror. The building that Robert Knight claimed was his home was abandoned.
I thought she'd be back in 15 minutes.
Not knowing where else to turn, Juanita went to her friend Ellen Reeves for help.
You know where she's at? No, I'm looking for the...
Concerned for the safety of her friend's daughter, Ellen insisted it was time to contact the police. Juanita told the officer that her happy, outgoing daughter would not have run away. The officer's focus turned to Robert Knight. Juanita said she had met Robert a month earlier. He introduced himself while riding through the neighborhood on his bike. They had become friendly, and Robert had become fond of young Vernita. The police didn't have a Robert Knight on record. The officer asked Juanita to check mugshots for anyone who might look like him. Juanita scanned 2 books of photos. Finally, she pointed to a picture of a man she was sure was Robert Knight. Officers determined that the person Juanita had identified as Robert Knight was really named Alton Coleman. Investigators called the FBI. Special Agent Verdina Passanelli of the FBI's Kenosha, Wisconsin office was assigned the investigation.
But the FBI always gets involved when children of tender years disappear under unusual circumstances, and this was clearly one of those.
Investigators wasted no time in obtaining a search warrant for Coleman's last known address, his grandmother's house in Waukegan, Illinois, just a few miles across the state line from where the Wheats lived. A young woman answered the door. When questioned by the detective, she identified herself as Deborah Brown, Coleman's girlfriend. At first, Brown was reluctant to answer any questions about Coleman or his whereabouts. She said she had been living at the residence for a year, providing home care for Coleman's nearly blind grandmother. The investigators persisted. They finally convinced Deborah to cooperate.
Do you know his whereabouts right now?
She told them that Coleman had been gone all night, but came home alone at about 8 o'clock in the morning. He had come by to change into a suit for a court appearance later that morning.
Can you tell me the last time you saw him?
Coleman had been charged with raping a 14-year-old girl at knife point. Brown also admitted that Coleman had told her he had done something really bad the night before,
What that bad thing?
but he did not explain what.
Recently?
Investigators waited at the house for Coleman's return while other officers canvassed the area.
Okay, do you know if did he drive?
He was nowhere to be found. The FBI joined forces with local investigators. Detectives from Kenosha and nearby Waukegan, Illinois, already knew Coleman's reputation. He was a violent criminal with a disturbing past.
As I learned about Coleman, I realized he was extremely dangerous because the Waukegan Police Department had an extensive arrest record on him. He had been arrested almost 10 years previously for the rape of a 40-year-old woman, and he had a number of other arrests, mostly for assault, for molestation, rape of a child. And as you looked at these cases and you listened to the detectives who were familiar with him, you saw a picture of an increasingly violent person.
The task force enlisted every available officer and agent to help in the search for Coleman and Vernita.
You want to get that?
Well, our strategy that night was to find Alton Coleman. We sat down then at the police department and assembled everything we knew. We came up with information that he a lot of times rode the train, he took taxis because he didn't have a car. What happened then is we split up into teams and went out and started interviewing people.
On the streets, investigators talked with drivers at various taxi stands. Everyone was familiar with Alton Coleman. The cabbies agreed that if they saw him, they would notify the police. The task force offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to Coleman's arrest. The promise of a reward caught people's attention, but didn't draw out any useful leads as quickly as the investigators hoped. Investigators feared that time may be running out for Vernita Wheat. On May 31st, 2 days into the investigation, a cab driver in Waukegan who knew Coleman from the neighborhood called in to report he was picking Coleman up. A squad car conducting surveillance in the area responded. Coleman was dropped off at his sister Terry's place. He saw the approaching officer and took off. disappeared into the neighborhood he knew so well. The investigation was only 2 days old, and their suspect was within their grasp. Investigators speculated Coleman was probably hiding out in the abandoned warehouses that ran along Lake Michigan. Hoping that Coleman might respond to his sister's voice, the detectives summoned her.
Waukegan Police, ma'am, please open up. I'm Detective Hanson from Luther, Antoine.
Though she was Coleman's own flesh and blood, she was also a mother of a young girl. The agents convinced her to help. Talking to her brother through a bullhorn, she pleaded with him to turn himself in.
Elton, you need to come on out and give yourself up.
Meanwhile, officers and agents fanned out and searched the area. But even in such a confined space, finding Coleman would not be easy. Lieutenant Mark Hansen of the Waukegan Police Department was the lead investigator for the task force.
This area has a lot of abandoned buildings, a lot of abandoned apartment complexes. It's heavily brushed. It was at nighttime, easy to escape in there and not be seen again. This was 1984. We didn't have helicopters with searchlights. We didn't have infrared. We didn't have the resources to fully encircle an area of that size.
The search continued through the night. But after 8 hours, it seemed their suspect and their best chance of finding 9-year-old Vernita had slipped through their fingers. Desperate to generate leads, investigators saturated the local media with details surrounding the abduction. TV and newspapers ran photographs of Vernita Wheat, asking anyone with any information to contact the task force. The news spread quickly. Investigators were flooded with sightings of Coleman from the public. Most were dead ends. But one cab driver who saw Vernita's picture on the news contacted the task force. He remembered picking up Coleman and the little girl on the night of her disappearance. He had assumed they were father and daughter. The cab driver dropped them off around midnight near a scrapyard in the industrial section of Waukegan.
That one particular night.
Where did you take him to?
Investigators approached the night manager at the scrapyard.
Sir, I'm Detective Hanson, Waukegan Police. Here's my card. This is Agent Showers.
He told them that he had in fact seen a man with a young girl on the night in question. He recalled that close to midnight, the two had walked hand in hand through the side gate. He couldn't really see the man's face, but he did notice that the man had an unusual rolling gait to his walk, a feature that acquaintances of Coleman had described. The night manager identified the little girl as Vernita Wheat. The sighting was enough to allow the FBI to issue a federal warrant for Alton Coleman. He had taken Vernita across state lines. It was also the last time anyone saw Vernita Wheat alive. The task force responded with another massive search.
We had about 150 FBI agents and detectives from both Kenosha and Waukegan. We did a methodical search where Coleman was last seen with Vernita. This included using dogs going through the junkyard, house-to-house and abandoned building searches, all in this downtown area, and we found nothing.
Investigators knew she was alive at midnight on the evening she disappeared. They also knew that Coleman was alone the next morning at 8 a.m. as he prepared for his court appearance.
So total there's
The question was, what happened to Vernita during that 8-hour gap?
profile from FBI headquarters in Coleman.
FBI Special Agent Jeff Showers was on the task force. he struggled to fit the pieces together.
How far is he going to travel with this girl? The girl may not even be in Waukegan. She may be in another town. But we knew that the longer that we waited, it was getting dimmer and dimmer.
Coleman and Vernita seemed to have vanished. On the night of June 19th, 3 weeks after Vernita's disappearance, investigators received a call from a man in Waukegan who was looking through an abandoned building for scrap metal to sell. On the second floor of the wrecked apartments, he made a horrifying discovery. The body of a child lay on the bathroom floor. Alton Coleman, the FBI's prime suspect in the abduction of 9-year-old Vernita Wheat from her home in Kenosha, Wisconsin, remained at large. As the hunt for Coleman intensified, a man scouring for scrap metal in an abandoned building in Waukegan, Illinois, came across the lifeless body of a young girl. The forensic team arrived at the building. Beneath a blanket, wrapped in a man's corduroy jacket, the investigators found the young girl. Her hands, feet, and neck were bound by a television cable. She was too badly decomposed to confirm her identity. But Special Agent Jeff Showers believed they had found the body of Vernita Wheat.
The clothing matched the description that we had from the mother. She was still wearing the barrettes in her hair that matched from what her mother had described her as being last known to be wearing. She was wearing the green nylon jacket. In the pocket of the jacket were carnival tickets, and we knew from an interview of her mother that the night in question, Alton Coleman had taken Vernita Wheat to a carnival.
While the investigators suspected the body was Vernita Wheat, it was up to the forensic team to prove that the remains were hers. They also needed to find evidence that could conclusively point to the killer. Starting from the location of the body, they worked their way out in concentric circles, collecting anything that looked like it could be used as evidence. Investigators swabbed walls and door frames in an effort to find prints. Figuring whoever moved the body into the room had to come in contact with the door, they removed it from its hinges and sent it to the FBI labs in Washington, D.C. Under the lab's microscopes, FBI examiners discerned a thumbprint on the door. Comparison to samples they had on file were conclusive. The thumbprint came from Alton Coleman. Examiners also compared prints taken from the little girl's hands to those lifted from Vernita Wheat's school books that had been retrieved from her home. That comparison was also positive. The search for Vernita was over. Investigators now had enough evidence to issue another warrant for Alton Coleman. This time, it was for the murder of Vernita Wheat.
We knew then that Alton Coleman was responsible for the death of this child. And now we've got not only a kidnapper, but we also have someone who's committed murder.
While at the autopsy to determine Vernita Wheat's exact cause of death, a television news broadcast caught the attention of Agent Showers and Detective Hansen.
The first news that a little girl had been found murdered in Gary, Indiana. Agent Showers, I think, immediately thought that there could be some connection to Coleman.
The report also mentioned something that investigators found disturbing. There were 2 killers, and the second suspect was described as being a black female. Investigators immediately suspected Coleman's girlfriend, Deborah Brown, who had not been seen in weeks. If investigators were right, Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown had traveled 90 miles from their hometown neighborhood.
Okay, you can
They were on the move, and they were leaving bodies along their way.
Come up with another form of transportation, and then he comes out.
At the hospital in Gary, Indiana, local police officers questioned 9-year-old Mary James about the afternoon of June 16th. Mary told the officers that she and 7-year-old Janice Clay were walking to the store when they were approached by a man and a woman on bikes.
Good. Hey, look.
The couple introduced themselves. They told the little girls that they had some clothes that the girls might like.
We got some shoes and stuff. You guys want to take a look at it? Okay, cool. We'll look right around.
To retrieve the clothes, Mary and Janice followed the couple into the woods.
You're 8 years old? How old are you?
You take care of yourself. We're gonna get the man.
Mary was close to death when she managed to drag herself to the street.
I'll show you these photos. I'll show you these photos.
She was able to identify Coleman, but could not identify Brown from photographs sent by the FBI.
No.
However, the girl's description matched Brown exactly.
How about this one right here?
Now, investigators were dealing with 2 killers.
We had looked at Deborah Brown up until that point in time as a witness because she had cooperated with us in Waukegan. She had told us about Alton telling her that he had done something wrong. She showed us the clothes that he had been wearing the night he had come back, when he'd been out all night and when he came back in the morning. So we had looked at her as a witness. We now knew from the investigation in Gary that she was likely assisting him.
Investigators struggled to figure out some way to predict Coleman and Brown's next move. Both murders occurred in largely black communities, communities where the two could easily blend in. And they were quick to gain people's trust.
These were street people. They had that charm. They didn't have to do any arm twisting. It was always a very easy thing with them.
Searching for anything that might help them locate and stop the killers, investigators consulted an FBI behavioral profiler. For the profiler, the escalating pattern of violence was caused by Coleman's legal problems back in Waukegan.
He saw the fact that he had taken Vernita the night before a court appearance on the rape of a 14-year-old, and that he had abducted her and then murdered her as an indication that he was responding to the stress of the court appearance, and so that he would continue to murder out of anger and stress and rage.
Investigators had reason to fear that the 2 murders were only the beginning of a ferocious crime spree. To capture a serial killer, the profiler suggested a massive national media campaign aimed at the black communities.
So we started a publicity campaign, releasing his photograph, releasing pictures of Brown to the media, press releases, everything we could to get his picture out in the forefront. Our hope was that somebody would see him and turn him in.
But the task force was always a step behind. On July 8th, agents received information from local Ohio detectives about an elderly woman named Rose Wiggins who reported her daughter missing. Rose explained that earlier in the day she had come by to check on her daughter and found the door locked. Her young grandson, James, was too frightened to open the door. The detective convinced him they were there to help. Now he had nothing to fear. Officers immediately started to search the house for the boy's missing mother. While looking, they found 3-year-old Johnny, afraid like his older brother. Meanwhile, James told the detective about the man and woman who had been at their house. He showed the 8-year-old photos of the suspects, Coleman and Brown.
This is the lady, right?
James positively identified them as the couple who were there the night before.
You're absolutely sure? Okay, Raymond. How you doing? Detective Smith.
Searching the house for the boy's mother, the police found blood smeared throughout the kitchen. It led down to the basement. Not knowing who or what awaited them, the investigators followed the grisly trail. In Ohio, police responding to a missing persons call made an alarming discovery. The young son of the missing mother had identified fugitives Coleman and Brown as having been in their home. Blood stained the walls. They proceeded cautiously, not knowing if their suspects could still be lurking in the darkened basement. The trail stopped, where the bodies of mother and daughter, Virginia and Kimberly Blake, were discovered, shoved into a crawl space beneath their home.
Coleman and Brown. We didn't know where they were, and the violence connected with the murders and the crime scenes was beginning to intensify.
The officers continued their search, still believing their suspects could be somewhere in the family's home. But they seemed to have slipped away, leaving behind unmistakable evidence, clippings of jerry-curled hair. James recounted for investigators that his mother, Virginia, had met Coleman and Brown earlier in the day.
What you guys doing? Fun. Hey, we just moved to the area down the street. What's your name?
The couple stopped by the house and played with the kids.
Yeah, we like live down the street. We're just like riding around.
Virginia invited them to stay for dinner. It was just like any other summer evening in the neighborhood. Virginia cooked while the kids hung around and chatted with their new friends.
Are you going to go in a ring? You're going to stay?
8-year-old James saw Coleman take a knife from the counter and slip it into his back pocket.
Soup's on, guys. Soup's on.
After enjoying dinner together, Coleman, Brown, James, and his younger brother settled into the living room to watch television. At the top of the evening news, the story of a pair of killers on the loose flashed across the screen. Coleman immediately turned off the television and shuffled the boys off to bed,
Have a good night.
while Kimberly and Virginia washed the dishes. Aware of the growing media attention, Coleman realized he and Deborah needed to change their look. He found some scissors and cut off his hair. Coleman, with Brown at his side, approached the little girl and her mother. Just upstairs, James and Johnny were asleep.
What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
They dragged the slain woman and her daughter downstairs and stuffed them into a crawl space.
The pressure was mounting. It was becoming increasingly stressful because here we were for the 4th time catching up with him when we found more bodies.
Coleman and Brown's MO was designed to catch their victims off guard.
Okay, Raymond, nothing's gonna happen.
When someone comes up to your house on a bicycle you figured them to be local. If they're walking, you may be a little bit suspicious. But if they're riding a bike, they're from the neighborhood. Your guard is automatically down.
News of the murdered mother and daughter horrified the community. The savage nature of the killings caused the FBI to add an 11th position on their 10 most wanted fugitives list. It was a rare occurrence. The number 11 ranking was reserved for particularly vicious killers, a description fitting Coleman and Brown.
The magnitude and the importance of it, that, you know, you've already got 10 that are bad, but here's one that's so bad, but we don't have room to put anybody else on. We're going to make an exception and put him on anyway, even though he's number 11.
With the national media spotlight focusing on the couple, it would be difficult for them to remain anonymous.
And in solving fugitive cases, finding people, there is nothing better than publicity, because all you need is the one phone call from one person saying, I saw this picture and I know it's this individual.
Phone calls poured in with more frequency and speed than ever before. Any crime that matched their suspect's MO was funneled back to the task force headquarters. Hopefully, they would be able to get one step ahead of the fugitives. Investigators were sure that Coleman and Brown would tire of a life on the run and return to familiar territory. Agents contacted everyone the two associated with in Waukegan.
We would contact them and let them know that we're still looking for them. We would go out and tell them that Alton and Deborah had been involved in another murder case, hoping that that would get them a little bit more on our side.
On July 13th, local investigators responded to a frantic 911 call from a suburb of Cincinnati, Ohio. Michelle Stone told the officers what had happened that day.
They were both young.
A couple arrived at the Stones' house earlier that morning. They told Michelle's father, Jack Stone, that they were interested in buying his camper, which was for sale in the driveway. Jack's wife, Anna, joined them on the porch. As Jack and Anna chatted with them, Michelle left for work.
I won't be long. I'll see you guys later. You'll be home for dinner? Yeah. All right.
Be careful, Mom.
Bye-bye. All I remember, I didn't really see them.
When she arrived home later that day, Michelle noticed the bikes the couple had arrived on were still in the yard. And her father's car was missing.
Mom?
Inside, she found her parents' home had been vandalized.
Mom?
She had called out to her mother and father. Hearing no response, her mind began to race as she stepped through the shattered glass and overturned furniture littering the room.
Dad? Mom? Dad?
As she called 911, Michelle could hear a weak voice calling out from another room.
Dad?
Next to the basement door, she noticed a bloody palm print.
Dad? Dad, are you here?
She walked down into the dimly lit room, not knowing what or who she might find. Lying next to each other, motionless on the floor, she discovered her parents. Her father, Jack, was barely alive. As she reached to take her mother's pulse, she lifted the sheet. Her mother, Anna, was dead. Michelle waited by her father's side for help to arrive. Her parents had been bludgeoned and bound. Michelle's description of the couple that had stopped by her parents' house earlier that day matched the fugitives, Coleman and Brown. A forensic team went to work collecting evidence. Among the items was a pair of plastic shoes next to Anna Stone. A recent sighting of the suspects included a description of Brown wearing these same shoes. Crime scene technicians also retrieved other bloodied tools found around the body. Later, forensics confirmed the crowbar was used to kill Mrs. Stone. Coleman's prints were all over it. He made no attempt to conceal his crimes. But there was nothing to suggest where the couple had gone.
It was all dead ends. Every time we'd find a body, they were gone. You don't have anything as to which way they're going. You have no indicators as to who their next victim's going to be. Depends. If they wanted sexual gratification, they may snatch a child. If they need a vehicle, they may snatch an adult. Just don't know. We've got a couple of mad dogs out there.
The crime against the Stones showed the couple was able to gain the trust of people from outside the black urban centers where they had found their first 4 victims. This realization only complicated the investigation. Coleman could fit in anywhere.
Or they would come up on a bicycle and start chatting, and he would be looking to play in a card game. Or sometimes they would respond, they wanted to buy something, or they had something for sale. He was an extremely glib person, a real con man, and people trusted him. Plus he was traveling with a woman, and so people were not nearly as suspect of him as they should have been.
Though Coleman's rage continued to intensify, his ability to charm more victims remained consistent, and he was showing no signs of growing tired of the kill. A month and a half had passed since Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown embarked on a killing spree that had left 5 victims dead. In Cincinnati, Coleman bludgeoned a husband and wife, leaving the wife dead and the husband barely clinging to life. Their car was missing. An APB was immediately put out on the vehicle. Two days later, a farm worker discovered the abandoned car on his property in Lexington, Kentucky, 105 miles away from the crime in Cincinnati. In less than 2 days, the fugitives had traveled hundreds of miles across 2 states. The FBI media blitz was leaving them with few places to hide. But the couple appeared to be heading further away from their home in Illinois, not closer, as investigators had hoped.
When you're talking about Alton Coleman and Deborah Brown, they are not a normal killing machine. A normal killing machine is going to be one person. We've now got 2 out there. They're working together. They're feeding off each other, and one's giving support. Those are the problems. We couldn't separate them. We couldn't talk to one. We couldn't talk to either one of them.
Knowing Coleman would eventually need to steal a car, the FBI saturated the Lexington, Kentucky area. They did not have to wait long for signs that he was still in town. In a hotel parking lot, Professor Oline Carmichael was assaulted and his car stolen. A couple forced him to hand over his cash and car keys. Leaving the professor wounded but still alive, they sped away. After receiving medical attention, police asked Carmichael to look at mugshots that included the FBI's most wanted fugitives. Without hesitating, he pointed to Coleman and Brown.
That's her, without a doubt. Those are the two.
The FBI were now only a few hours behind the fugitives. An APB was issued for Carmichael's car. In a matter of hours, they received a response. It came from police in an Ohio town close to the Kentucky border. The professor's car was found, abandoned behind some vacant buildings. Coleman and Brown, however, were nowhere in sight. For the experienced agents, finding the car in Ohio meant Coleman and Brown were probably on their way home.
Gut instinct is going to tell you that he's going to come back home. He may not come back to Waukegan, but he's going to come back to some place that he feels comfortable with. He'd never been to Gary, Indiana. He'd never been to Detroit. He had never been to Toledo. Had never been to Cincinnati, Dayton, Ohio, Lexington, Kentucky. At some point, he's going to get tired and he's going to want to get back to comfort. Some place that he feels comfortable. He knows the streets. He knows the people. He's going to feel comfortable. He's coming back.
The FBI immediately set up a dragnet. Agents and police officers from across several states joined forces to track Coleman and Brown as they headed home to Illinois. Reports of stolen vehicles or assaults were to be given immediate attention. An officer in Dayton, Ohio, responded to a report involving an assault and a stolen car. The call came from an elderly couple, Reverend and Mrs. Gay. Reverend Gay had been badly beaten. Mrs. Gay told the officer that a young couple who they had met weeks earlier broke into their house. After beating them, the attackers demanded the keys to their station wagon. According to the description, the attackers were Coleman and Brown. New leads were coming in at a furious pace. Coleman and Brown were still just out of reach. But the FBI was starting to close the gap. The day after the attack in Ohio, detectives involved in the FBI's dragnet discovered a station wagon that had been abandoned near a car wash in Indiana. It belonged to Reverend Gay. Later in the day, some road crew workers on the edge of Interstate 65 outside of Zionsville, Indiana, made a gruesome discovery. It was the body of an elderly man who had been reported missing from his home in Indiana. He was found on his 77th birthday. Evidence left at the scene was unmistakable. Coleman and Brown had claimed another life. The body was found less than 20 miles from the couple's home turf. The country's most wanted fugitives had come home, and the FBI was waiting for them. For 7 weeks, Coleman and Brown assaulted and killed victims in 6 different states. While investigators worked the crime scenes, scores of local officers and agents organized a dragnet to trap them as they headed back home to Illinois. The aggressive media campaign was having an impact. On July 20th, in Evanston, Illinois, a man spotted Alton Coleman with Deborah Brown in Mason Park. While he waited with the car running, his friend called the police. It was the one phone call investigators had been hoping for.
He went to school with Alton Coleman. He knew without a shadow of a doubt that the man that crossed the street in front of him was Alton Coleman.
Evanston police responded. Only a couple of yards stood between the law and Coleman and Brown. With surprising ease, they were able to corner Coleman. He insisted they had the wrong man. A second pair of officers surrounded Brown. When asked, she gave a different pair of names for herself and Coleman.
What's your name?
Trina Williams.
Having found a knife and a false identification, the officers brought Alton Coleman to the police station.
4 other units be advised when you pick up the female, she might have a weapon in her purse. Make sure you check it. She's 10-0.
A search of Brown's handbag uncovered a .38 caliber pistol.
523-607. Meet us over here. We got
The weapon was all they needed to handcuff her and take her in.
Anything we need to know about? No?
2 of the FBI's most wanted were apprehended without incident. After nearly 2 months, the violent rampage was over. Coleman continued to insist he hadn't been in any of the places where the murders happened. But the forensic evidence collected over the past 7 weeks proved otherwise. Alton Coleman was charged with the federal crime of kidnapping Vernita Wheat, followed by murder charges in 3 other states. Deborah Brown was also charged for her role in the murders. As investigators from the task force looked on, a strip search uncovered a bloody steak knife. It would be linked to yet another murder, a 15-year-old Ohio girl, Alice Myers. Illinois State's Attorney Matthew Chansey was given the task of prosecuting Alton Coleman. In his mind, the motive was simple.
With Vernita Wheat, he crossed a threshold, and once he crossed that threshold, it was easy for him, and I think that he enjoyed it. And it wasn't just easy anymore; it was something he liked. He liked doing, and so he looked for every opportunity he could to repeat that.
Together, Coleman and Brown had stolen 7 lives. 3 states sought to take theirs. Brown stood trial separately. She was sentenced to life in prison. Until the end, she was committed to Coleman.
At Coleman's sentencing hearing for that murder, she testified on his behalf that she had committed the murder and he had not, in an obvious attempt to try to save him. It didn't work.
Coleman and Brown's rampage had covered over 1,300 miles in 6 states. For Special Agent Berdina Passanelli, the intensity of the FBI's hunt prevented more needless murders.
Because of the massive investigation that we did and the publicity that we did, that he was caught within 7 weeks of when he started. Had we not done that, had we not gotten on this right away, who knows how long he would have gone on killing people.
In the end, Alton Coleman was sentenced to death 4 times. He went to prison in Ohio, where he was executed on April 26, 2002. Early in the 1980s, a charismatic leader arose in Miami.
Why art thou so far?
He drew the weak, the poor, and the powerless to his side. He promised them a better life, but they had to follow his commands to earn it. His temples soon sprouted across the country as thousands were drawn to his gospel. And those who questioned his doctrine started turning up dead. Local police and the FBI had to stop him.
In Miami, the discovery of a mutilated body sent investigators on the trail of a deadly cult. But agents found a wall of silence around the cult's members. Potential witnesses, terrified of reprisals, refused to talk. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. It would take a massive operation involving 120 agents in 7 cities to bring down a deranged fanatic who believed he was God.
Friday, November 13th, 1981, Miami, Florida. On the outskirts of the city, a construction foreman was checking his work site. On a dirt road, he came upon something wrapped in blankets. It was a body. He called police. Detectives from Miami-Dade responded. The foreman said he hadn't seen the body when he passed by earlier that morning.
What's happening? Got a problem here.
The body must have been laid there recently.
What? No head. Not yet.
The detectives inspected the remains. It was an African-American male. He had been decapitated. Detectives found only a set of keys on the victim. There was no wallet or identification.
No, we just...
4 feet away, detectives found the victim's head wrapped in sheets.
How far do you think it's worth?
His fingerprints were taken in the hopes that they might help identify the man. Decapitations are rare, usually performed to hide a murder victim's identity. According to Detective John King, that wasn't the motive here.
There was no attempt to hide or prevent identification because they left the head actually on the scene. Usually, if you're going to try to prevent an identification from being made, you would take other body parts, such as the hands or the head also. It seems like it was more ritualistic than anything else, how he was killed.
The victim's face was badly damaged. Visual identification would be difficult. And unless the man's fingerprints were on record, investigators would have no way of identifying him from his prints. Perhaps the autopsy could tell them more. The medical examiner determined that the victim had been severely beaten before his decapitation. His nose was bloodied, his teeth were broken, and his eyes were swollen shut. His wrists showed ligature marks, and sneaker tread marks on his body suggested he'd been kicked. On the back of his neck, the medical examiner found evidence of repeated blows from a dull blade. It had been a large weapon, perhaps a machete. Comparing the victim's fingerprints wouldn't be easy. In 1981, the database wasn't computerized. Features of the print had to be compared manually against thousands in arrest files. Eventually, one investigator hit the mark. The victim's name was Aston Green, age 25.
All right.
He had been arrested a month earlier for a misdemeanor driving charge in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah, we got a match.
They found no history of violent crime.
510.
Detectives went to Aston Green's last known address, his mother's house.
My son?
Yes, ma'am. Can you maybe help us out by telling us when
After informing Mrs. Green of her son's death, detectives asked her about Aston. She said her son had recently turned to religion. He seemed very serious about it. She'd last seen him 2 weeks earlier. She'd prepared a vegetarian meal for him in accordance with his new religious beliefs.
So tell me what's going on with you? What did he do to you?
They talked about his conversion. He explained he was a Hebrew Israelite, a Yahweh. She told investigators that his son was committed to his Yahweh beliefs.
That's when we first heard the word Yahweh. I had no idea what the Yahweh was all about. I never heard the name before, knew nothing about them.
I don't know, but
Aston Green's mother didn't know his new address, though she did have a phone number.
this is the number that he gave me the last time I saw him.
She said he had a housemate but didn't know his name. From the phone number, detectives determined Green's new address, about 12 miles from downtown Miami. Due to the violent nature of the murder, they called for backup before approaching the house. No one answered.
Dade County Police, open up!
Perhaps Green's housemate had been harmed too. Detectives decided to enter the house. The key they found in Green's pocket fit the lock.
Dade County Police!
We entered the house thinking that hopefully we wouldn't find any other bodies, but we went in to check it out. We found a number of items of a religious nature, textbooks, workbooks, a lot of literature. It turned out that it was from the Hebrew Israelite religion.
There was no sign of the housemate.
We also found a machete that was tucked to the side of one of the sofas in the residence. We immediately became interested in the machete because that could be a weapon to decapitate somebody.
The machete appeared to be clean. Investigators continued their search. By the door, they found a phone number. They traced it to a house 2 miles away.
Hi, I'm Detective Christopher. This is Detective King. Can we talk to you for a few minutes?
At the house, the detectives talked with a group of Hebrew Israelites.
I'm sorry to have to inform you, but
Among them was Aston Green's housemate, Carlton Carey. All of them knew Green through the Yahweh Temple. They told investigators that Green, like themselves, had grown disillusioned with the rigid social doctrine of the temple.
can you tell me something about? I've seen him in the temple, but I don't.
To them, adherence to the temple's leader was at too high a price.
We're just trying to get as much information.
Their colored turbans signified their desire to break away from it.
It makes this much easier than us.
We spoke to them briefly. We got a little bit of background information on the temple and what it was all about. And we asked them to respond to the homicide office so that we could take statements and in-depth interviews with them about what happened and what they knew.
Several suggested that the killers were probably zealous members of the Yahweh Temple who wanted to silence those who questioned the doctrine. Most were afraid to say more, especially to police. They were already branded dissenters. They feared any further disobedience could be punished by death.
Well, all the people that we spoke to perceived a great deal of danger because of threats that had been made to them, both on the phone and by word of mouth from other members that were still in the organization. They were concerned for their safety, and the death of Aston Green certainly confirmed this.
The next day, Green's housemates came to the police station to talk. Despite the threat, Carlton Carey and his wife wanted to help. His wife was interviewed in a separate room at the station.
Yeah.
Carey said that he and Green had embraced the temple until recently, when its leader, Hulon Mitchell, started calling himself the true Messiah. The charismatic leader of the temple, Hulon Mitchell, believed that blacks were descended from the lost Hebrew tribe of Judah. As followers of Mitchell, members abandoned their given names. They took a biblical first name and adopted the last name of Israel. Mitchell did not allow dissent among his followers. Mitchell eventually changed his name to Yahweh ben Yahweh,
Some things I wasn't comfortable with.
which means God, Son of God.
In fact, during the interview we had with him, he referred to Hulon as not the Messiah, but a crook and a swindler, which was his characterization of Hulon Mitchell at that time.
Carey still had reservations about talking to police. Detectives offered to escort him home.
Gentlemen, a ride home?
That's okay. I have a way home. I'm fine.
All right.
He declined, opting to leave with his wife alone.
When they left the homicide office that night, they didn't want to be escorted because any police being with them would be further attraction to anybody that saw them, and they were concerned about being seen with anybody. They didn't want us to escort them home.
Carey and his wife took a winding route home to make sure no one had followed them. They never suspected someone to be waiting inside. As Miami police investigated the beheading of a dissident member of a religious group, 2 informants were ambushed in their home. Carlton Carey had been shot to death. His wife, Mildred Banks, had also been shot, then her throat was slashed. She barely clung to life. Like the beheading victim, the 2 were dissident members of the Hebrew Israelites. At the scene, police found a bloodied machete. Detective John King believed a similar weapon had been used in the earlier beheading.
The fact that a machete was actually used in an attempt on Mildred's life certainly gave more credence to the belief that the Hebrew Israelites were involved in it.
Detectives learned that many members of the Hebrew Israelite movement owned machetes. Police searched the house. Nothing found at the scene indicated who was responsible for the assault. Whoever the killers were, they had cut the phone line and left no physical trace of themselves behind. Detectives' only hope was Mildred Banks. If doctors could save her, perhaps she could name her attackers.
Mildred was very seriously injured as a result of the attack on her. She was shot in the chest, the bullet was still in her, and she had a deep gash to the left side of her neck. She was given a very low probability of surviving those injuries.
Police waited several days to see if she would survive surgery. Without her description of events, investigators had little hope of solving the case. Mildred Banks pulled through. When she was conscious, investigators visited her in the recovery room. Though critically wounded, she was able to answer questions from the police. She said that she and her husband had driven by their house several times to be sure no one had followed them. They saw no one, so they went inside. she was certain that her attackers were Yahweh's, sent because they had spoken to police that day. She never saw their faces.
We were concerned that they may actually make an attempt on her at the hospital, so we posted 2 police officers at all times with her throughout her stay at the hospital. They were there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for approximately 1 month.
The message of this most recent attack was clear to dissenting members of the Yahweh Temple. Those who spoke out or cooperated with police would suffer reprisals.
After the homicide of Carlton Carey, we were not able to locate any of the former members that had split from the temple. They had fled in different directions. They became scared and they just left.
Detective King needed to learn more about the Yahweh organization. He and his partner visited its Miami temple.
We tried interviewing people and we really got nowhere. Every time we spoke to somebody, it was praise Yahweh or, see the public information office at the temple.
Through a spokesperson, Hulon Mitchell, the Yahweh leader, claimed to know nothing about the murders and offered no help. Suspecting he knew more, investigators began surveillance on the Yahweh enterprise.
The surveillance was sort of a constant rolling type surveillance where you drive by, write down some tag numbers, but to actually sit off and watch the place, it was impossible because at all times there were guards standing outside the temple watching the front door.
Detectives did learn that the Yahweh organization was extensive. In Florida and in 13 other states, the Yahwehs owned real estate, buses, and vehicles that the leader claimed totaled nearly $50 million. Some said membership topped 12,000 in Florida alone.
Most of these people are hard-working professionals that really didn't believe in a lot of what Hulon Mitchell was teaching. Certainly they were not racist to the level that he was, and they were not believing much of what he was telling them about him being the Messiah. They did, however, believe much of what the religion itself taught, surrounding Judaism and the Muslim religion.
Since the Yahweh organization spanned several states, the FBI began investigating. Supervisory Special Agent Herbert Cousins was assigned as case agent. He believed the organization demonstrated elements of domestic terrorism.
Domestic terrorism investigations are conducted in a group of individuals who engage in criminal activities to further their social or political goal.
Local and federal investigators looked deeper into the organization.
Why art thou so far from helping me?
Hulon Mitchell invited the homeless, the destitute, and the ex-con to join his Hebrew Israelites.
Thine anger. The Lord shall swallow them up.
People with no job or family found a place to belong, receiving food, shelter, and employment. This kindness didn't reflect Mitchell's underlying mission. He taught that blacks, as the true Jewish people, had a crucial role. He told his followers that their duty was to bring about heaven on earth by destroying the white oppressors. To his most avid followers, Yahweh ben Yahweh was the Messiah, and everything they had belonged to him, including their labor. To raise revenue, the Yahwehs manufactured and packaged their own hair care products, tonics, beverages, t-shirts, wine, and more. The merchandise was shipped to his network of temples all over the country. Yahweh required his members to reach certain income goals for their temple by selling these wares. In turn, the temple fed and sheltered them, and even educated their children. Despite the allegations of violence and his thinly veiled message of hate, Mitchell's temple continued to prosper and spread. According to Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Scruggs, the general public was unclear about Mitchell's true intentions.
The Yahwehs in the early 80s had been amassing power and property, and they had kind of a dual reputation. People saw them as a somewhat scary group that they knew were preaching hatred and violence, but at the same time, they outwardly appeared to be quiet, well-behaved, mannered, and they would go in and buy these properties in distressed neighborhoods and actually clean them up.
Not everyone welcomed their presence in the neighborhood. In May 1986, people in Delray, Florida, drove them out. At around 2 a.m. the same night, the neighborhood was firebombed. The fire destroyed the entire block and injured 1 adult and 3 children, including a 9-month-old infant. Police suspected Yahweh members were responsible. One officer recalled an incident that happened in the area about an hour before the bombing. While cruising the neighborhood, he spotted some men dressed in black standing near a van. The area reeked of gasoline. The men seemed suspicious, but they weren't doing anything illegal. They claimed they were having engine trouble. He took down the license plate number and left. Police determined that the van was registered to an elder at the Yahweh Temple. Hulon Mitchell denied any involvement in the firebombing attack. One of his followers was more cooperative.
We were able to develop an informant who actually walked into the FBI, who provided information regarding the group.
The informant confirmed investigators' suspicions that Mitchell's henchmen were responsible for the firebombing. But he had no direct evidence. He then gave agents information about another crime. He confessed that he had participated in the slaying of Aston Green, the man found beheaded on a dirt road. He said that the dead man had been considered a threat since he openly questioned Hulon Mitchell's authority. Green was abducted from the temple and severely beaten.
All right, head back to the van. Get back to the truck.
The informant drove him there, and another member carried out Mitchell's order to behead him.
All right, let's go, let's go! Get out of here, let's go!
Why should we believe?
The information was crucial but limited. Investigators still had no physical evidence tying Hulon Mitchell to Green's murder. Authorities would have to carefully build trust among the ex-members. Detective John King re-interviewed Mildred Banks, the woman who had been ambushed in her home.
In following up from the information with Woodside, I made contact with Mildred Banks, and she turned me on to an individual that was a former member of the organization that might be able to assist me. I subsequently made contact with that person, who took me around to a number of locations where former members resided.
As investigators continued their search for a witness courageous enough to come forward, Miami police received more disturbing news. A murder victim was found in his car with both ears cut off. Police wondered if this ritualistic killing could be related to the machete attacks. In September of 1986, as FBI and Miami police investigated the leader of the Yahwehs, Hulon Mitchell, police responded to another bizarre murder. 61-year-old Raymond Kelly was found stabbed to death in his vehicle. Both ears had been severed. One was recovered at the scene. Police believe the killer took the other. Metro-Dade Homicide Lieutenant Rex Remley's squad worked the case.
In the Dade County area, we had experienced a number of cases in which victims had been murdered and there was an ear missing. In several of those cases, it appeared that it may be the same perpetrator that had committed the crime.
To investigators, it looked as if Kelly had been drinking just prior to his death. Detectives collected several sets of prints from the vehicle. But what investigators found missing from the car held greater importance. According to the victim's wife, he always kept a .38 revolver in his glove compartment. Now it was gone. The gun's serial number was entered into the National Crime Information Computer. If the gun turned up anywhere in the country, Miami-Dade police would be notified. Weeks later, police in Opelika, a suburb of Miami, responded to emergency calls from residents of an apartment complex.
It was an apartment complex that had recently been taken under siege, for lack of a better term, by the Yahwehs.
Tenants who lived there called it the Dirt Road Apartments. A low-income housing project, some local residents considered it an eyesore. Many were delighted when the Yahweh leader Hulon Mitchell bought the property. Dirt Road residents were not.
Unfortunately for the residents, their idea of taking the building over was to actually move the residents out. And sometimes, according to the residents, that was by force, where the Yahwehs would actually come into their apartments and remove furniture and belongings while the people objected but had no real way to stop these individuals.
The Yahweh's strong-arm eviction efforts made the TV news. One resident, Anthony Brown, was particularly outspoken.
I'm gonna stay here until I get eviction notice. I don't care what they say. I do, because they ain't going in. Just simple as that.
He cursed the Yahweh's leader, Hulon Mitchell. Investigators knew that Mitchell didn't tolerate public criticism. Witnesses told police that tensions at the apartments continued after night fell. That evening, violence erupted and 2 men were killed. Police responded to the double murder. They chased one of 2 suspects in the shooting. A canine unit tracked down the man. The suspect carried nothing in his pockets except 2 bullets.
We got the bullets out of his left pocket.
Nearby, police recovered a .38 caliber revolver. It was not the murder weapon. Police cross-checked its serial number in the crime computer but found no match.
Your room right here. Just keep an eye on you for this.
The suspect was arrested and taken to the Opelika police station. Metro-Dade Lieutenant Rex Remley interviewed him there.
I was just trying to get his basic information, was that he had told me that he was Nehemiah Israel, and when I asked him about his age, he told me that he was over 400 years old. So that's the type of individual that I was dealing with.
The name he gave was a Yahweh name, and police found Yahweh clothing in the car he had used to flee. Police suspected that he had been sent to silence those who had spoken out against the Yahwehs. A fingerprint match revealed that the suspect's real name was Robert Rozier. He had spent time in prison for burglary and car theft. Lieutenant Remley also learned that he was a former football player in the National Football League.
He then began to have problems after he had left his football career. He had a history that went from crimes in Maryland to crimes in San Francisco area to crimes in Dade County. So he had an extensive past.
Rozier's arrest marked the first time an active member of Hulan Mitchell's group was caught at a crime scene. Though they could only charge Rozier with loitering and prowling, authorities suspected he was guilty of much more. Miami police looked for more information from residents who lived nearby the complex. Most residents were reluctant, but several came forward.
We were able to determine that Mr. Rozier had in fact been involved in chasing Mr. Brown across the field. He was present, it was our feeling, when the shots were fired where Mr. Brown was killed, and that he had also attempted to flee from the scene. He was charged that morning with the murder of Mr. Brown.
Lieutenant Remley still wondered about the handgun found at the time of Rozier's arrest. It was a .38 revolver, the same type missing from the car of murder victim Raymond Kelly. Though a computer check failed to match the guns, Lieutenant Remley pulled Raymond Kelly's file just to be sure.
There had to be more of a story to this gun. And I finally found the documents that had been provided by the family that showed the serial number of this gun. When I checked it, I was amazed to see that it was the exact same gun that we had impounded at Opelika that night. Unfortunately, when the gun had been entered into the computer, one of the digits had been displaced in some way, and therefore when we ran the gun found at the scene of the murder in Opelika, it did not show as being Raymond Kelly's stolen weapon.
Robert Rozier was now connected to the murder of Raymond Kelly. Prints lifted from Kelly's vehicle matched Rozier's. His fingerprint was found at another slashed-ear murder as well. Investigators had enough evidence to charge him with 2 slashed-ear murders and the double murder at the Dirt Road Apartments. Rozier found himself facing 4 first-degree murder charges, and very likely, the death penalty. As Miami investigators tried to close in on Yahweh leader Hulan Mitchell, they arrested a man suspected of being one of Mitchell's enforcers. Robert Rozier sat behind bars facing 4 capital murder charges. Investigators hoped Rozier would turn on the leader. The Yahwehs and their organization became the target of public scrutiny. Hulan Mitchell, their leader, refused to meet the press. He stayed hidden behind his followers, who passed out pamphlets explaining that Rozier had been framed. The bad publicity could destroy all that Mitchell had built. He hired a high-priced attorney and public relations expert. It was Mitchell's first step in creating a new image for his organization.
Quickly as possible.
What the hell did you want? I'm here to help you.
Mitchell offered the attorney's legal help to Rozier.
Make this mess go away.
Rozier quickly realized that the attorney was there to protect the interests of Hulan Mitchell, not Rozier's.
Just talk to me.
Yeah.
But Rozier still refused to turn on the leader of the Yahwehs.
Roll 5.
Lieutenant Rex Remley recalls that the media attention prompted other insiders to talk.
The media brought out different stories about people that had been inside the organization who wanted to speak about what had occurred. And it also brought other people to law enforcement who, for maybe the first time, realized that there was a significant reason at this point that people were being killed, and it was time to come forward and tell what you knew.
Right.
Investigators got a call from Oklahoma. One of Hulan Mitchell's relatives wanted to talk. She told them she'd witnessed a martial arts expert from New Orleans beaten to death by Yahwehs in 1983. She said Mitchell had ordered the beating. The young man's name was Leonard Dupree. Dupree was killed because Hulan Mitchell believed the man had been disrespectful.
He changed his name.
Detectives tracked down Dupree's mother in New Orleans.
Hello, my name's Rex Remley.
She confirmed that Leonard was a martial arts expert and had left home in 1983 to join the Yahwehs. But without a body or other evidence, investigators couldn't arrest Mitchell. While investigators were learning about Hulan Mitchell's dark secrets, he was opening his temple to the public.
Water coolers down the hall. Okay. And you're off.
To improve its image, Mitchell encouraged the most avid followers to take work in the community at large. But one avid member was beginning to change his mind about the leader he had followed so closely. For weeks, Robert Rozier sat behind bars, watching Hulan Mitchell distance himself further and further from the murder suspect. Then, in June of 1987, Mitchell formally excommunicated Robert Rozier on live TV. With the symbolic stroke of a marker, Mitchell had separated himself from Rozier permanently. Rozier had no one left to protect but himself. He decided to begin working with the FBI. It was the break agents were hoping for. Just after his transfer to federal prison, Rozier told investigators that he knew of at least 20 murders across the country that had been ordered by the Yahweh leader Hulan Mitchell. To agents, it was clear that Mitchell hid behind organized religion as a front for organized crime.
Why?
Rozier also explained why he and another man killed Anthony Brown and Rudy Broussard at the apartments in Opelika. For Special Agent Herbert Cousins, it confirmed what he already suspected.
Brown and Broussard were executed. That's pretty much what happened. They resisted being evicted from their homes, and they spoke out on TV against the Yahwehs, and we were told that was the reason why they were murdered.
Rozier also confessed to the murder of Raymond Kelly and another man whose ears had been cut off. Rozier told agents that the Yahweh leader directed him to kill as many white devils as possible and to return with an ear as proof. With Rozier, the FBI had a witness who could connect Hulan Mitchell to deadly violence. But because he was a killer himself, Rozier wasn't an ideal prosecution witness. U.S. Attorney Richard Scruggs needed to find others willing to corroborate Rozier's stories.
We just started traveling all over the country, tracking down these individuals, trying to convince them to testify and to cooperate. One of the questions that we would get early on from the witnesses or from the prospective witnesses was, will I be at risk if I testify? Will something happen to me? Am I likely to get killed? It's the only time in my 22 years of experience that I have told people, because I felt like I had to tell them, is that yes, there is a chance that you will suffer retribution.
Hulan Mitchell fought the investigation by continuing to polish his public image.
I would like everybody to give a nice warm welcome.
He continued to turn distressed buildings into gleaming properties.
The opening of the store.
As Yahweh ben Yahweh, he toned down his anti-white message and made large contributions to popular causes.
think it'll make the area a better place. Watching Yahweh become stronger and stronger, and watching him become more and more accepted by the community, I, as well as all of the investigators, felt he had to be stopped.
Hulan Mitchell became a bigger-than-life public figure, enjoying all the legitimacy money could buy. He seemed unstoppable. After almost a decade of investigation, the FBI still lacked enough evidence to arrest self-proclaimed Messiah, Hulan Mitchell. Intimidation and murder had silenced most who dared to speak out against him. Assistant U.S. Attorney Richard Scruggs had a difficult time persuading members to overcome their fear.
I prayed with people, I begged people, I cajoled people, I urged them to do the moral thing, I urged them to do the ethical thing, I urged them to fight a false religion, and basically used every means I had available to me to convince people to cooperate.
Those bold enough to stand up against Hulan Mitchell, the man who called himself the Son of God, were placed under witness protection.
Do hereby proclaim Sunday, October 2nd, 1990, as Yahweh ben Yahweh Day.
As Mitchell continued to thwart the investigation privately, publicly, his legitimacy grew as Yahweh ben Yahweh.
He's having photo op sessions with the mayor. The mayor proclaimed Yahweh ben Yahweh Day, and there are banners on the streets saying, proclaiming Yahweh ben Yahweh Day.
In October 1990, despite his public successes, the FBI filed sealed arrest warrants for him and a dozen of his followers. They were kept secret to allow the FBI a month to plan the arrest. Agents dubbed the plan Operation Jericho. Special Agent Herbert Cousins knew it would be dangerous to take Yahweh ben Yahweh in Miami, since he was at the height of his popularity there.
The main issue for law enforcement was safety. The safety of the individuals, the law enforcement members involved in the arrest, and also the safety of innocent individuals and the safety of Yahweh members, including Yahweh ben Yahweh.
Fortunately, Mitchell and others named in the indictment were scheduled to embark on a multi-city tour. Yahweh ben Yahweh's first stop would be in New Orleans. The main arrest team would seize him at his hotel. Once he was in custody, teams in 6 other cities would capture his henchmen across the South.
There were a number of arrest teams in different cities, several cities: Atlanta, North Carolina, New Orleans, Miami. I was sent to New Orleans to assist the New Orleans division with the arrest of Yahweh ben Yahweh.
On November 6, 1990, Hulan Mitchell arrived at the Monteleone Hotel in New Orleans. The FBI was already there.
The meeting went well.
Right. To track Mitchell's movements, undercover agents were posted on every floor.
They're coming up now. They're coming up.
Throughout the South, teams took their positions outside Yahweh temples and waited for orders from Miami. Success depended on an unbroken flow of communication. The agents in Miami coordinated the entire operation.
Everybody's ready to go.
At 3 a.m., everyone was in place. They gave New Orleans the go-ahead. Agents in the hotel called Mitchell's room.
The first instruction was that he instruct his bodyguard to turn himself into the agents who were waiting down the hall.
bodyguard?
The second instruction was that he come out with his hands up and that he walk slowly down the hall.
Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Agents didn't know if Mitchell or his bodyguards were carrying weapons.
Let me see your hands.
Finally, their main suspect emerged.
Hands on your head. And on your knees.
They sent word to Miami.
You're under arrest.
Mitchell was captured.
Commit murder.
Go. You gotta go.
The other teams swarmed in, arresting the criminal members of Mitchell's temple.
Get down! Down! Get out of here! Next passenger! Open the side door! Step to the rear of the van!
In a matter of minutes, scores of agents mobilized to capture a dozen suspects across hundreds of miles.
Make a form of line. Stand beside each other.
No one was hurt. We accomplished our goal. We arrested as many individuals as we could identify during the operation, and that's why I believe it was very successful.
Hulan Mitchell was charged with extortion, conspiracy, and murder in aid of racketeering. Prosecutor Scruggs believed he was still dangerous.
We found out that there was actually a hit team of 5 individuals who were stalking us, trying to find out where we were so that they could kill us upon the orders of Yahweh ben Yahweh.
At trial, his intimidation even penetrated the jury.
We knew there were serious problems. We knew people were scared. Several jurors actually got dismissed prior to deliberations because they were scared to go back and deliberate.
Perhaps it was fear that caused what prosecutors considered only a partial victory. In May 1992, Hulan Mitchell and 6 of his more violent followers were found guilty of conspiracy. But Mitchell himself received only 18 years in a maximum security federal prison. It had been a difficult case for investigators.
He found a successful philosophy that people would flock to and actually start joining and pledge their allegiance to him. And I think the more power he obtained, the more influence he obtained over his followers, that he ultimately lost control of himself. And he believed in his own mind he could do anything, even order life and death.
Hulan Mitchell is locked away, his murderous actions halted by those who saw through his false gospel.
Just do it. Just do it. All right, hands up. Hands up. Take that money up. Come on.
A series of crimes in a small farming community left people reeling in shock and fear. As the hunt for the suspects expanded, they turned to the FBI for help. They traveled over 1,000 miles to find the deadly perpetrators before more innocent victims crossed their path.
In June of 1997, a crime wave swept Iowa like a tornado. It left a trail of robbery, kidnapping, and murder in its wake. And then it moved on. No one knew where. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI committed its resources to tracking down the suspects. By the time they were identified, they already had a 12-hour lead. The pursuit would take the FBI across 6 states in their efforts to catch the killers.
June 11th, 1997, south central Iowa. The farming region, rich with crops and livestock, began to stir as dawn became morning. Most farmhands had arrived hours earlier to begin their chores. But one who never missed a shift without calling had failed to show that day. Her boss, a nearby farmer, became worried when he called and got no answer. Since she lived alone, he went to check on her. He noticed her pickup truck wasn't there, and the front door was ajar. Inside, he found the lifeless body of his farmhand, Barbara Garber.
Barbara.
Mahaska County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest responded to the 911 alert.
In 20 years of law enforcement, I've been involved with about 5 or 6 homicides. So it's not something that happens a whole lot in Oskaloosa, Iowa, or Mahaska County. When we went into the living room, we observed Barb Garber's body. She was sitting upright, fully clothed in a chair. She was leaning over to the left side, and there was blood coming from her head.
The sheriff called specialists from the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation to process the scene. The middle-aged woman had been shot 4 times at close range while she sat in the chair. Technicians recovered .22 caliber shell casings close to the victim. At her feet, they found her half-eaten breakfast. The absence of defensive wounds on the body indicated the farmhand had put up no struggle, according to Iowa Special Agent Michael Barrier.
The house did not appear to have any forced entry. It looked like someone had just entered the house, either been let in or had gotten in without having to break in. The residence had a lived-in look but was not ransacked, and there was nothing obviously taken from the residence other than her vehicle was missing from the driveway.
Green pickup truck.
The farmer described the victim's vehicle as a late-model dark green pickup truck.
And that was her personal truck? Yes.
Detectives issued a be on the lookout for the missing truck to all law enforcement in the area.
Vehicle, a station wagon.
As you were coming down this road?
Yeah, coming along this road here.
Investigators spoke to her closest neighbor, who lived a quarter mile down the road. She had noticed something earlier that day when she was on her way to work in the pre-dawn hours.
All the way down there.
She saw an unfamiliar blue hatchback or station wagon backing out of Mrs. Garber's driveway. But she didn't see who was inside, and she didn't get the license plate.
This vehicle was described as a older, not in very good shape, station wagon type vehicle, blue in color. The vehicle was not a vehicle that had been seen at the Garber residence before and was not really associated with the Garber residence, and so we felt that it may be and probably was a suspect vehicle.
As police were talking to the neighbor, an alert came across the police radio.
What you got? Okay, I'll be en route.
A bank 5 miles away in the hamlet of Gibson had just been robbed. Deputies from 2 counties responded. Because deposits are insured by the federal government, the FBI was called in.
Yes.
The closest field office was 77 miles away in Cedar Rapids.
2 males, armed. Okay. All right, we'll be heading right there. Larry, we got a bank robbery in Gibson. Okay. All right.
FBI Special Agent Scott French was assigned the case.
2 males. What are they armed with? All right, bye.
The small savings bank in Gibson had just opened for business for the first time that day to the town's population of 70.
Down south here. Right there.
It has one paved road to the community of Gibson. The rest of the area is surrounded by farmland with a few gravel roads leading away from the community.
It would take Agent French over an hour to get there. Sheriff's deputies arrived first to secure the crime scene and take witness statements. Bank employees told investigators that the robbery had occurred at about 10 a.m. They had no customers at the time, and there was no guard on duty. Only a teller and the manager were inside when the robbery took place.
All right, get your hands up!
Two armed robbers wearing dark ski masks, gloves, and brown coveralls burst into the bank. One held a shotgun while the other carried a handgun.
Pick that money up, come on.
The robbers scooped stacks of cash and banknotes into plastic trash bags.
Come on, hurry up! Let's go! No, up against the wall, now, go!
They had gotten away with $65,000 in cash.
Moving.
Though they wore masks, bank employees believed both men were white males.
The Gibson Savings Bank did not have any security system. That is, no video cameras, no film to have recorded the robbery. This makes it difficult for investigators to have some evidence other than witness statements.
Investigators found only one person who had seen anything, a 10-year-old girl.
If you had to guess, what kind of car would you say it is?
She told agents that she'd been riding her bike across the street when the robbery occurred. Two men in ski masks holding bags had jumped out of a gray car and had run into the bank. She rode away before the men came out. The girl was either too young or too scared to get the license plate. Police put out an all-points bulletin alerting units to be on the lookout for a gray sedan as a possible getaway vehicle.
I felt the robbers in this particular case were from the immediate area. First of all, the Gibson Bank is a very isolated location. Second of all, both individuals were wearing coveralls, which are somewhat indigenous to the working people in these communities.
Car 32, car 32.
10-4, I got it.
The deputy on his way to the robbery scene headed for likely routes the bandits would have used to escape.
Central, I'm going to check this out. We have a car matching the description.
2.5 miles from the bank, he noticed a gray sedan, apparently abandoned in the middle of a farm field. No one was in sight. He checked the car and radioed in the license plate number. It was registered to a teenager by the name of Island Schultz, who lived nearby.
He thought it was extremely unusual that this vehicle would be sitting where it was. And knowing that they were only just a couple of miles away, he drove to their house.
Iowa communities are tight-knit, and the officer happened to know the Schultz family. At the teenager's home, he got no response. The deputy found the front door unlocked.
Island?
Inside, he discovered 18-year-old Island Schultz lying on the floor, shot to death. He radioed for assistance. Mahaska County Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest felt strongly that this second homicide was likely related to both the first murder and the bank heist.
We're relatively sure in our own minds that these were all connected. They were in a 5-mile radius of each other. And again, that's just not something you see a lot of in rural Iowa, where you would have 2 bodies and a bank robbery all within a matter of 2 hours.
The recent high school graduate had been shot twice in the head from close range. An audio cassette and 2 .22 caliber shell casings, the same caliber found at the first murder scene, were recovered close to her body. Like the earlier homicide, investigators found no indication of forced entry and no defensive wounds on the young girl. Iowa Special Agent Michael Barrier discovered another important connection to the first murder victim, Barb Garber.
A neighborhood canvass in the area of the Schultz residence gave us information that a green pickup truck, newer, in good shape, was seen parked in the Schultz driveway at about 9:30 a.m. that morning. That's interesting to us because Barb Garber's pickup is a newer, dark green Dodge pickup truck. And so we believe that after her truck was stolen from her residence, that it ended up at the Schultz residence. And that tied the 2 homicides together.
Both bodies were sent to the county medical examiner for autopsy. Analysis of the bullets confirmed what investigators had suspected. Each victim had been killed with the same weapon, a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol. The FBI and local investigators assembled a command center in the Mahaska County Sheriff's Office. They set up a hotline and contacted the media with a description of the farmhand's late model dark green pickup truck.
We occupied a large debriefing room, which acted as a command post. We began to collate leads that were coming in from all parts of the community. There was also significant media attention at this point, which increased the volume of phone calls that were coming in.
Deputies chased down dozens of leads. One was from a teenager who had seen a green truck that fit the description of the farmhand's pickup. He was in the town of Oskaloosa in the late morning when he noticed the truck drive past with 2 men inside. The witness didn't see their faces and he didn't get the license plate. It wasn't much to go on since that particular truck was so common in the area.
We received dozens upon dozens of sightings, most of which turned out to be absolutely nothing. It was just a green 1997 pickup. And everybody that was driving one at some point in time that day in the Mahaska County area was stopped.
Everyone except the driver of the murder victim's truck. Investigators fanned out to search the various small towns in Mahaska County for more promising witnesses. They found one who said he noticed something at around 10:30 or 11 on the morning of the crime spree. He saw a dark green pickup truck near the town of Oskaloosa. The witness identified the driver as a local man whom he'd never seen in that truck before. He claimed there was a passenger inside, but the truck pulled away before he could see who it was.
The individual who reported it recognized the driver of that truck as being Jamie McMahon, a person that he knew, and knew well enough to have recognized him and was positive that it was Jamie McMahon. He also said that there was a second individual in the truck, but he could not get a close enough look to tell whether it was even a man or a woman, just that there was a second person in the truck.
Hey guys, what I want to do is, Don, I want you to take a background on Jamie.
At the end of the first day, investigators now had the name and face of a possible suspect in the 2 killings and bank robbery. 22-year-old local Jamie McMahon. Agents and detectives hoped they could catch up with him and his unidentified accomplice before any more lives were lost. On June 12, 1997, the day after 2 Iowa residents were killed and a bank was robbed, The FBI and local authorities had the name of a possible suspect, 22-year-old Jamie McMahon. McMahon was last seen driving a green pickup that fit the description of the missing vehicle owned by one of the murdered women. Investigators believe that an unidentified passenger traveling with him may be an accomplice. Special Agent Michael Barrier of the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigation learned that Jamie McMahon's last known address was at his parents' home in Oskaloosa, Iowa. His parents were concerned to hear from Agent Barrier because they hadn't seen their son since the crimes had occurred.
When we spoke to friends and family about Jamie McMahon, we found that he had been a good kid, hard worker, but that in the past few months prior to these crimes, his personality had changed somewhat, that he began to lose weight, that he had stopped working, and that it just appeared that he was having problems.
You mind if I ask
Investigators arrived at McMahon's home to search the house and find out more from his parents.
This won't take long. The providers will be helpful.
Over the past several weeks, McMahon had been spending a lot of time with his 18-year-old stepbrother, Christopher Kaufman. Kaufman lived close by, but the two had different sets of friends and normally didn't see each other much. Lately, they'd been inseparable. Now, both were missing.
These are good.
Because the bank had been robbed by two individuals, and because the witness had seen McMahon driving a truck with a second individual, we just had to assume that Chris Kaufman was the second person with Jamie McMahon.
Detectives interviewed McMahon's friends, who remembered seeing him with Christopher Kaufman late on the night before the crimes, driving an old blue station wagon. One friend had lent McMahon the car for the past few months, since the suspect couldn't afford one, according to Mahaska County Sheriff's Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest.
This vehicle was a blue station wagon, which would appear to be a hatchback type vehicle if you just drove past the back of it. This would also tie in with the vehicle that the neighbor seen in Barb Garber's driveway earlier that morning.
Investigators searched the car, but found no evidence that physically connected McMahon or Kaufman to Barbara Garber's murder.
Any unusual behavior?
McMahon's friends mentioned that he had always wanted a dark green pickup like the victims, but the sticker price was out of his range.
Jamie had an infatuation with this particular type of vehicle. Earlier that year, he had one on order that fit the same as what Barb Garber's was, and did not have the money to pay for it, so he canceled the order.
His friends added that the day before the murder, McMahon had stopped by with Kaufman to borrow something else. A .22 caliber semi-automatic handgun that he claimed he was going to use to shoot stray cats. The same type of gun was used in both murders.
Card.
Investigators asked his friends to call immediately if the suspect contacted them for any reason. Authorities learned from several other friends that the suspected murderer had recently been abusing the drug methamphetamine. FBI Special Agent Scott French was concerned about McMahon's mental state, since the illegal drug is an addictive stimulant.
Abusers of methamphetamine suffer a variety of side effects, one of which is they can be awake for several days. Second is they have loss of appetite. But of a greater concern to law enforcement is they have significantly clouded judgment. They become increasingly paranoid, and they may be easily agitated.
A widespread manhunt was launched for the stepbrothers in the dark green pickup truck that was still missing.
5:30, the neighborhood cameras revealed that a small blue car was seen at the Garber residence.
Agents and police also notified additional law enforcement agencies and media outlets throughout the Midwest. Warrants for murder and unlawful flight to avoid prosecution were issued for McMahon and Kaufman.
Initially, we felt that they had left the state, and we could only speculate as to where. Most of the investigators there felt very strongly that they were probably headed for Mexico.
Investigators revisited the homes of the pair's friends and family, figuring they would try to contact them.
We're going to put a recording device into the phone.
McMahon's ex-girlfriend gave the FBI permission to install a phone tap and recorder.
Figure out where he's at and what's
If
going on.
McMahon called, agents would be ready to trace his location. As the manhunt for McMahon and Kaufman continued, a call came into the task force office. Two sets of local parents reported that their teenage daughters were missing. The high school girls, 16 and 17, had not been home since the previous evening. They were best friends and were always together. With two killers on the loose, the parents feared for the girls' lives. Investigators discovered that McMahon and Kaufman had been partying with several girls at a motel in Oskaloosa the night before the crime spree.
Okay, thanks.
At the motel, a clerk told investigators the girls had stayed overnight and were still in the room on the morning of the crimes.
Yeah, those are the girls. Those are the girls, yeah. Those are the ones.
The employee saw McMahon and Kaufman with a green truck later on that same day. She said the two girls left with the stepbrothers.
Yeah.
Investigators issued another nationwide bulletin that the fugitives McMahon and Kaufman were last seen in Iowa traveling with two teenage girls.
We were concerned for the safety of the girls. I believed at the time that if Jamie McMahon was willing to kill someone he knew, that the girls may be in danger.
Investigators responded to a promising tip that came into the hotline. McMahon and Kaufman had been spotted at a trailer several miles away from their family home. Investigators had no way of knowing if they were still armed, high on methamphetamine, or if the teenage girls were still with them.
Not wanting to take any chances and not knowing their mental state, we had the FBI SWAT team come in. Basically, we surrounded the cabin and came in from several different directions.
Heavily armed agents hoped for the best, but were prepared for the worst. Officers yelled for McMahon and Kaufman to come out. There was no reply. The police team stormed in, ready to use deadly force. In June of 1997, the FBI and Iowa investigators stormed a trailer in a remote field on the second day of a nationwide manhunt for 22-year-old Jamie McMahon and his 18-year-old stepbrother, Chris Kaufman. The pair were suspected in 2 murders and robbing $65,000 from a bank. 2 missing teenage girls were believed to be with them.
Clear. Looking back here.
Investigators found no trace of the fugitives or the girls. Sightings of the stepbrothers in the stolen green pickup were reported from as far south as Texas to as far north as Minnesota. With $65,000 in cash and a 12-hour lead, Iowa Special Agent Michael Beria realized the pair could be anywhere by now.
We were unable to really come up with any place that they may go. We had information that they might have gone to Minnesota. We also had information that they may have friends or relatives in Florida. But we didn't really have any solid direction of travel where they went.
Hey, what's up, it's Jamie.
After 7 days of searching, the FBI got the call they'd been hoping for.
Yeah, they're looking all over the place for you.
Agents were ready with a phone tap when Jamie McMahon called his ex-girlfriend. During the call, McMahon asked if authorities had any idea who killed Mrs. Garber and Eileen Schultz.
He was fishing for information. He was trying to see what we knew and whether we even knew that they were suspects in the case. And she just told him, you know, what did you do, and why are they looking for you? And he became aware quite quickly that he was a suspect and that we did know that they were involved, and he hung up.
The agent called his supervisor at the Mahaska County Command Center. FBI Special Agent Scott French learned McMahon had been on the phone long enough to trace his call.
After we received the phone call from McMahon, I began the process of trying to track down the number from where he called. At some point, we reached a snag with a phone company outside the area, wherein they could not determine or provide the number until the following day.
Agents learned that the suspected killer had called from a hotel in Kissimmee, Florida. The employee recognized photos of the two fugitives and confirmed the two teenage girls were with them.
Okay, are they in this hotel? Are they registered here? Are they in the hotel at this time? Please check.
No, they checked out.
But they had all just left.
When did they leave?
The phone company's delay had given McMahon and Kaufman just enough time to stay ahead of law enforcement.
McMahon and Kaufman are gone. We missed them.
So they know we're looking for them now.
They know we're looking for them.
Good.
Agents were concerned that McMahon and Kaufman would be more difficult to find now, since they knew the FBI were on their trail.
All right, well, thanks, and I'll get back on this.
All right.
All right.
Though authorities had missed McMahon and Kaufman in Florida, the two teenage girls who had been traveling with the fugitives returned home safely to their parents.
Parents, take a seat, get some coffee.
Investigators questioned the girls about the time they spent with McMahon and Kaufman. The teenagers confirmed that they had stayed with the young men at the Oskaloosa Motel on the night prior to the crimes. The next morning, McMahon and Kaufman came by in a green pickup with a lot of cash. McMahon, the eldest of the group at 22, offered them a free trip to Florida. The impressionable teenage girls agreed to go with the stepbrothers and didn't ask a lot of questions.
The girls told us that they weren't aware that there'd been a homicide, and they weren't really aware that there'd been a bank robbery as such, but they were aware that something had happened to allow McMahon and Kaufman to have so much money.
The girls told investigators that on their way out of town, they stopped by the Des Moines River. One of the stepbrothers threw a duffel bag into the water, but he never told them what was inside. After that, the four of them drove south toward Florida.
For the first week of this trip with McMahon and Kaufman, the girls treated it like it was a vacation. They were having a good time. They were eating out. They were going to amusement parks.
One of their first stops was in Branson, Missouri. There, the four entertained themselves on carnival rides. The girls said they took photos along the way.
They had with them a couple of Instamatic cameras, and we took those cameras and had the film developed, and we had photographs of McMahon and Kaufman, and one picture in particular is of Chris Kaufman sitting in Barb Garber's pickup truck.
After their trip to Disney World, the girls said that McMahon and Kaufman finally confessed to them about the murders and the bank robbery. Kaufman had dyed his hair blonde to disguise himself. High on methamphetamine, the armed men also told the girls they wouldn't mind killing them as well. The girls were frightened and told the fugitives they wanted to return home.
All right, look, here.
McMahon gave them money for a taxi and train fare back to
Get y'all
Iowa.
back home.
They told investigators they had no idea where the stepbrothers were headed.
they didn't say where they were going. They just gave us money and we left.
Investigators concluded the girls were not involved since they remained at the Oskaloosa motel when the crimes had occurred. They released the teenagers into their parents' custody without filing charges. On the Des Moines River, an off-duty Iowa trooper happened to come across a bag in the water. He opened it to find a pair of black ski masks and brown coveralls. The officer also found a wallet with a driver's license. He contacted police and gave them the evidence. The wallet and driver's license belonged to the murdered Island Schultz. The clothing matched what the robbers were wearing when they made off with $65,000 in cash from an Iowa bank. Jamie McMahon and Christopher Kaufman remained the prime suspects, and they were still out there, armed and strung out. On June 30th, 1997, 19 days after the search for McMahon and Kaufman began, a call came into the Escambia County Sheriff's Department in Florida. A motorist in Pensacola wanted to talk to police.
Everybody involved in this that you can, okay?
He told them he was driving on a nearby highway when he noticed a green pickup. The night before, he had seen a story about the manhunt for McMahon and Kaufman on television. The truck seemed to fit the description of the fugitive's vehicle. The motorist pulled alongside to get a closer look. He thought the driver looked exactly like the man featured on the show. The truck also had Iowa tags. The motorist pulled off and phoned police.
South, east, and west of the area.
The Escambia County Sheriff's Department realized the motorist's description of the truck matched the one Iowa authorities were looking for.
Compass and compass right there.
Iowa authorities wanted to be sure this wasn't just another false lead. It seemed promising, since the suspected murderers were last seen in Florida. They confirmed the license number and sent photos of the stepbrothers to the sheriffs in Pensacola.
That's the same guy I'm thinking of.
Iowa investigators alerted them to use caution, since the fugitive pair were considered armed and dangerous. An urgent be on the lookout was issued for the green truck in the Pensacola area. Deputies searched local roads, shopping centers, and motel parking lots for any sign of the fugitives or the stolen green pickup truck. In the parking lot of a local motel, 2 officers spotted a green pickup truck. Motel residents usually park close to their room entrance, but this vehicle was obscured near the back behind a fence. Its Iowa license plate and description checked out. It was the murder victim's stolen truck from Iowa. Authorities had no time to lose if they hoped to bring in the fugitives before they eluded them once again. At a Pensacola, Florida motel, authorities had finally located the stolen pickup truck driven by Jamie McMahon and Christopher Kaufman. Stepbrothers suspected of 2 murders and a bank robbery in Iowa. Escambia County deputies needed to confirm if the armed fugitives were staying there.
I didn't know if you'd seen these gentlemen today, people, man.
Yes.
The motel clerk recognized the photos of McMahon and Kaufman. But she added that there was a 3rd man in their room. She gave deputies the room number.
Possibly a hostage situation.
Police told her the motel had to be evacuated.
Yes, no problem.
Okay, I'll go with you.
Fearing that the stepbrothers had possibly taken a hostage, deputies called in a hostage negotiating team.
We know they've killed 2 already.
Escambia County Sheriff Sergeant Jerry Cox was in charge.
We want to establish a command post in this area. That's where we're We knew they were armed. We knew that they were murder suspects. We knew they were bank robbers. They were seriously violent criminal individuals. So we got the call out, our SWAT team and crisis negotiators got the call out, and we responded to the motel.
The motel was evacuated. The hostage negotiating team set up an emergency center nearby. SWAT teams took up positions near McMahon and Kaufman's room. Snipers set up on a nearby roof. No one knew the situation with the third man or his relationship with the stepbrothers. They had no way of knowing if they were all still inside. The negotiator secured the line and attempted to get them on the phone.
Okay, we got the line.
From the man's tone of voice, the negotiator believed he was likely a hostage.
When I made contact with the room, the first individual that I talked to was the hostage himself. He gave me a false name, and I began to try to talk to him a little bit, knowing that was not the correct name, of course, and try to find out what his situation was, what his physical condition was, and what the situation was in the room.
The man said he had just met the fugitives hitchhiking and stayed with them to party for a while. The stepbrothers had been awake for almost 4 days, high on meth, and now they were finally crashing.
There's no way. They'll shoot.
The man had since become aware they were murder suspects and that they were still armed.
He was absolutely frightened out of his mind. He did not know what to do, and he knew that they were willing to take life. They had made statements to him that they would not be taken alive, and therefore he was afraid to make any moves because of what they might do to him.
Bobby?
The negotiator tried to convince him to leave the room, that the rescue team would be at the door when he emerged. While the man considered what to do, McMahon woke up.
All night. Well, yeah, one of them's getting up. But it's the cops, man. You guys gotta let me out of here. What?
One of my major concerns was the fact that they were known drug users and had been partying for a number of days. When people are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, when it comes to negotiations, one of the things you have to be aware of is how those chemicals can alter a person's personality and alter their reactions. They might be extremely aggressive.
Due to their 3-week drug binge, it became clear to the negotiator that the fugitives were not thinking clearly, if at all.
What are you talking to the cops for? Calm down, man. Whoa, calm down. Here.
His first concern was to get the third man out safely without more bloodshed. Authorities were all too aware that the situation could turn violent quickly.
Paramount in my mind was the fact that if they killed 2 already, and both those murders, based on my information, were cold-blooded, calculated murders with no thought given whatsoever to the consequences, that they could easily do that again.
Hold on. Shoot everybody. Calm down. Just sit down. Calm down, man. Just hold on. No, man. Put that away. Put that away, man. Who is this? Chill. Calm down, man. Just hold on.
Sharpshooters stood at the ready. The negotiator tried to convince them to let the man out of the room before someone else was killed.
Shouldn't have done that, man. What, man? What do you want? He's not us. I'm out. No way, man. He's gonna walk out? There's no way. All right, fine. You don't mean nothing crap to us.
Let the hostage go.
Man, Chris, let him go, man.
After 2 hours, the armed men finally allowed him to leave unharmed.
Yeah, put your hands on top of your head. Come towards me. Come towards me. Come towards me.
SWAT members spirited the hostage out of the line of fire to where the negotiators continued to work. The hostage said he met the fugitives in New Orleans and had been with them for several days. He said they had a lot of drugs and a lot of cash in the room. They only had one handgun as far as he knew. With 2 armed fugitives still barricaded in the motel room, a peaceful resolution did not seem likely. In June of 1997, hostage negotiators and a SWAT team surrounded a Pensacola, Florida motel where 2 armed fugitives wanted for 2 murders and a bank heist in Iowa remained barricaded inside their room, strung out on drugs. Escambia County Sheriff Sergeant Jerry Cox was the lead negotiator.
It's the most difficult segment of the negotiations for me, was to try to overcome the emotional state that they were in as a result of their drug use, their prolonged activity of being awake for so long, and to try to direct them in a peaceful resolution.
He spoke to 18-year-old Christopher Kaufman for some time.
This is Chris. We didn't kill everybody.
The young fugitive was aware that he was surrounded by police. Sergeant Cox tried to convince him to do the sensible thing and come out unarmed.
But one of the things I was able to learn from Kaufman was that he was tired, that he was just too physically and mentally exhausted to be making an awful lot of decisions.
Worn out, Kaufman passed the phone to his 22-year-old stepbrother, Jamie McMahon.
Hello? What?
The negotiator noticed that McMahon seemed more lucid, more mature than his younger brother. He used it as a hook to separate the two.
So I told him, I said, it's obvious to me that you're the one who's running the show in there. I need you to take charge and do something for me. And he said, what is that? And I said, well, what I need you to do is I need you to take care of your brother. I need you to get him out of there.
Look, just go.
The strategy worked.
Man, just go. I started this. Let me finish.
Movement, red one, white male.
Chris, man, I just want you to go.
McMahon didn't want his brother to suffer
No,
whatever
look at me, man. You
consequences
just gotta
McMahon
go.
was going to face by staying in the room.
Go.
SWAT members secured Christopher Kaufman. Now, only his stepbrother remained. McMahon teetered between indecision and despair. He knew his options were limited. The 22-year-old began to weigh life in prison versus suicide.
I heard what was sounded to me like a weapon being charged. It was an automatic pistol that he had in there, so it sounded like somebody had slid the slide back and ejected a shell into the chamber, arming the weapon for firing. Gave me some concern. I passed that information on to our commanders and our SWAT team.
McMahon's judgment was clouded.
You there?
He didn't want to spend the rest of his life behind bars.
No, man.
Confused and desperate, he looked to the negotiator for guidance.
And the thing that seemed to work the most was constantly reminding him that as long as he was alive, he had some hope. He had a chance. Once he was dead, there was no chance. And that in Iowa, there was no death penalty. He had an awful lot of years ahead of him to figure this out.
McMahon relented to the negotiator's insight. 4 hours after it had begun, the last fugitive walked out of the room, unarmed as instructed. The negotiator was able to defuse the situation without death or injury. Agents secured and searched the motel room. They recovered $29,000 in cash of the $65,000 that was stolen. They also found the .22 semi-automatic handgun. On every table rested empty beer bottles, marijuana, and powdered methamphetamine. Ballistics tests later confirmed that .22 was the weapon used to kill the 2 women in Iowa. Authorities questioned the pair separately.
I understand from your brother that you committed both of the murders.
No. One of the...
Kaufman told investigators it was his stepbrother's idea to rob the bank. To pull off the heist, they needed a car. McMahon already had his eye on the first victim's pickup truck, the truck he initially wanted to use as the getaway vehicle.
think I may have left it at a different friend's house. You mind if I use your phone real quick?
Mrs. Garber knew McMahon and allowed the brothers into her house.
Man, just put the phone right back down, please. Yeah, please.
Look, I've got money in the house. You don't
Shut
need
up,
to,
man.
you don't
Just
need
sit down
to.
right there. Just sit down. Just sit down!
You don't
Once
need
inside,
Just do
Kaufman
it.
claimed his stepbrother egged him on to kill her.
Just do it! All right, do it!
He wanted Mrs. Garber dead so she wouldn't report the vehicle missing. Kaufman said he shot Barbara Garber twice, then again to make sure she was dead. Since McMahon loved her truck so much, he wanted to keep it and steal a different vehicle to use in the robbery. McMahon decided to try another friend of his, Island Schultz.
Hey. You remember my brother Chris, right? Hey, we are really out of gas, so can we borrow some money?
Sure, no problem. Come on in. We got some.
Like Mrs. Garber, their second victim let McMahon in along with Kaufman. The pair claimed they needed money for gas. She lent them $5.
That's fine for now. Yeah.
As she bent over to put a music tape on, Kaufman told investigators his stepbrother shot her in the back of the head. To make sure she was dead, McMahon shot her again between the eyes. The stepbrothers took Schultz's car keys and wallet. Over the next 3 weeks, the pair spent $36,000 on hotels, prostitutes, and drugs before they were apprehended in Pensacola, Florida. Though Iowa had no death penalty, Jamie McMahon, 22, and Christopher Kaufman, 18, faced the federal death penalty for 2 carjackings resulting in death. They faced another federal charge for bank robbery. To avoid a death sentence, the stepbrothers pled guilty to all federal and state charges. Their convictions left many unanswered questions for the people of Iowa and Mahaska County Chief Deputy Paul DeGeest.
These two guys were as common as any two boys next door. I can't explain why they would go to this extent to get a vehicle and to go on vacation or just to impress a couple of girls. It's just crazy. You'd never guess that they would be the two type of individuals to do that, knowing their parents, knowing their backgrounds. I mean, it just didn't make sense.
Jamie McMahon serves the rest of his life in Leavenworth, Kansas. Christopher Kaufman serves his time in solitary confinement in the tough Supermax federal prison in Florence, Colorado.